My name is Alara Reed. For 41 years, I have lived my life as a river does, following the path of least resistance, carving a gentle course through the landscape I was given. I was born and raised here in Port Blossom, a town nestled in a valley where the scent of damp earth and blooming dogwood hangs in the spring air. My parents were quiet, kind people who taught me the value of soft-spoken words and steady work. I suppose it was their influence that led me to open the Gilded Finch, my little haven of handcrafted jewelry, silk scarves, and artisanal goods on Main Street. The shop is a reflection of me, calm, curated, and filled with a quiet beauty that doesn't need to shout to be noticed. For 15 of those 41 years, my life's river flowed alongside another. My husband, Liam. He was, or so I thought, the sturdy riverbank that contained and directed my flow. We met in college, two seemingly complementary souls. I was the dreamer, he was the pragmatist. I saw the world in shades of watercolor. He saw it in spreadsheets and quarterly reports from his job at Northwood Financial. For a long time, it worked. He anchored me, and I, in his words, gave him something beautiful to look at. The text message arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a conversation about porcelain teacups with Mrs. Gable and the gentle chime of the bell above my shop door. The afternoon sun, filtered through the old, wavy glass of the storefront, cast long, dancing shadows across the polished wooden floors. The air smelled of lavender potpourri and old paper. It was, in every way, a perfectly ordinary moment. Until it wasn't. My phone buzzed softly on the countertop, a discreet hum against the smooth oak. I glanced down, expecting a shipping notification or a reminder from my dentist. Instead, I saw Liam's name. Alara, I'm doing this by text because I don't think either of us would benefit from a difficult scene. I've met someone. Her name is Chloe. She's young, full of life, and she makes me feel seen. We're moving to Sanibel Island to start over. I've taken what I need from our joint savings to get us started. I think it's best we make a clean break. I'll arrange for my things to be picked up later. I truly wish you the best. I read the words once, then twice. They were so clinical, so polished, like a press release for the dissolution of a partnership. There was no rage, no shouting, just the cold, sterile efficiency of a man closing a deal. My hands, which had been carefully wrapping Mrs. Gable's teacups in tissue paper, did not tremble. My breath did not catch in my throat. The only sign that the foundations of my life had just been dynamited was a strange, sudden stillness that settled deep within my bones, a quiet so profound it was almost a sound. Will that be all for you today, dear? Mrs. Gable asked, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. I drew in a slow breath, the scent of lavender grounding me. Yes, Mrs. Gable. That's everything. My voice was my own, steady and warm. I finished wrapping her purchase, tied the box with our signature pale green ribbon, and handed it to her with a smile that felt surprisingly genuine. It was a practiced motion, a muscle memory of grace and service that operated independently of the chaos blooming in my mind. After she left, the little bell chiming her departure, I stood alone in the sun-drenched silence of my shop. I looked at the text message again. I've taken what I need from our joint savings. The words were meant to be a fatal blow, the final, decisive act of his departure. He would be picturing me now, panicking, checking our balance, feeling the floor drop out from under me. He would be imagining tears, frantic phone calls, the satisfying drama of a woman undone. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the keypad. For a moment, I considered the torrent of words I could unleash, the anger, the betrayal, the 15 years of shared history reduced to a coward's text message. Instead, I typed 2 words, imbued with a quiet finality he would not understand until it was far too late. Good luck. Liam was not wrong in one respect. The signs had been there. Not like flashing red lights or blaring sirens, but more like a subtle shift in the current, a change in the water's taste that only someone who had spent years navigating its depths would notice. It began about a year ago. The late nights at the office became more frequent, but his paycheck, which I saw when I did our taxes, never reflected the supposed overtime. He developed a sudden, almost frantic devotion to the gym, his body changing from the comfortable softness of middle age to something harder, more angular, as if he were trying to chisel away the years. His phone, once left carelessly on the nightstand, became his constant companion, always screened down, a locked fortress of secrets. He spoke of a new receptionist at his firm, Chloe. He mentioned her in passing, a bright young thing, sharp as a tack, who was helping him streamline his projects. He said her name too often, with a little too much enthusiasm. I met her once, at a drab company holiday party. She was all vibrant energy and bright, nervous laughter, her eyes fixed on Liam with an adoration that was as naive as it was transparent. She was 24. Young enough to be his daughter and innocent enough to believe his performance of a misunderstood husband trapped in a quiet, passionless life. The turning point for me, the moment my gentle, flowing river hit a dam of cold, hard reality, came 4 months ago. Liam was supposedly at a late-night work dinner with clients. I was watering the ferns on our front porch when I saw his car pull into the driveway. As he got out, something fell from the passenger seat onto the pavement, a single, perfect, long-stemmed rose, still wrapped in its crackling cellophane, the kind you buy from a street vendor after a romantic dinner. He had never, in 15 years, bought me a single, spontaneous rose. It was a cliché so blatant, so insulting in its lack of imagination, that it jolted me awake. He scooped it up, a flicker of panic in his eyes before he composed himself. From the restaurant, he'd said, a little too quickly. They were giving them out to all the clients. He threw it in the trash before he even came inside. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. The time for confrontation was long past. Instead, a deep, protective instinct I never knew I possessed rose up within me. The next morning, I made an appointment with Eleanor Vance, a lawyer whose name I'd seen on a plaque in one of the city's oldest, most respected buildings. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a demeanor that was both compassionate and uncompromising. I sat in her quiet, book-lined office and told her everything, my voice never wavering. I told her about the late nights, the new wardrobe, the secret phone, the rose. I don't want to leave my marriage, I said, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. But I feel like my marriage is leaving me. I need to know how to protect myself. Eleanor listened without interruption. When I was finished, she nodded slowly. Wisdom is not about predicting the storm, Alara, she said, her voice a calm baritone. It's about building a sturdy shelter long before the first drop of rain. We'll build you a shelter. On her advice, I opened a new set of accounts at Viridian Trust, a bank different from the one Liam and I used. Over the next few weeks, I began the quiet, methodical process of disentangling my life from his. My inheritance from my parents, which had sat dormant in a joint savings account, I moved to my private one. The Gilded Finch was already a sole proprietorship, established with my own funds long before Liam's career had taken off, a fact he seemed to conveniently forget, often referring to it as your little hobby. I tightened my bookkeeping, ensuring every penny of the boutique's considerable profits was funneled into its own business accounts, separate and untouchable. The joint account, the one Liam had just gleefully emptied, I treated like a stage prop. I left a carefully calculated amount in it, around $8,000, enough to represent our typical monthly cash flow. Enough to be a painful, but not fatal, blow. Enough to keep him from suspecting that the vast majority of our liquid assets were safely beyond his reach. He thought he was draining the reservoir. He had no idea he was merely emptying a bucket I had left out in the rain. Locking the shop door that evening, the familiar click of the bolt echoed the closing of a chapter in my life. I walked home through the quiet streets of Port Blossom, the evening light turning the sky to a soft wash of apricot and violet. The old craftsman bungalow I called home, with its wide porch and blooming wisteria, had been in my family for 3 generations. It was my grandmother's house, then my mother's, and now mine. The deed was solely in my name, a point of contention for Liam over the years. We should put it in both our names, for legal reasons, he'd suggest periodically. It's simpler. I had always demurred, guided by an instinct I hadn't understood until now. Tonight, walking up the familiar stone path, I felt a wave of gratitude for that stubborn, quiet refusal. This house was not a marital asset. It was my anchor, my history, my fortress. Inside, the silence was different. It was no longer the empty silence of a house waiting for someone to come home. It was a peaceful silence, a space filled only with my own breath, my own thoughts. My phone buzzed again. Liam, don't bother trying to call and beg. Chloe and I are on our way to the airport. I'll let you know where to send my golf clubs and the old records. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Eleanor Vance. It's time, I said, my voice clear and steady. He made his move. There was a pause on the other end, and then Eleanor's calm, reassuring voice. The papers are drawn up and ready, Alara. I'll file them first thing in the morning. Do you want him served on Sanibel Island? A small, wry smile touched my lips. No need to rush, I said softly. Let him enjoy the sunshine for a day or 2. Let him think he's won. Another buzz from my phone. I know this is probably a shock. You've gotten comfortable. But you have your little shop to keep you busy. You'll be fine. My little shop. The hobby that had, in the last fiscal year, generated a net profit nearly double his corporate salary. I walked into my home office, the one Liam rarely entered, and pulled out the neat, color-coded files I had been compiling for months. Bank statements, credit card bills with suspicious hotel charges highlighted, screenshots of his increasingly condescending texts. The last text of the evening made me sit up straight. By the way, the flights and the hotel at the Azure Tide Resort are first class. My treat. Put them on the joint credit card. Consider it a parting gift. LOL. Perfect. He had gift-wrapped his own undoing and handed it to me. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the back of the credit card. Hello, I said, my voice the epitome of calm concern. This is Alara Reed. I need to report several fraudulent charges on my account. Of course, Mrs. Reed. Can you identify the charges in question? The agent asked politely. Yes. 2 first-class tickets to Fort Myers, Florida, booked today. And a reservation at a place called the Azure Tide Resort on Sanibel Island. I also need to remove my husband, Liam Reed, as an authorized user on this account, effective immediately. And you're stating these charges are fraudulent? That's correct, I said, a sense of steely resolve settling over me. I have text messages from my husband in which he admits to leaving me and to booking this trip with his girlfriend using our shared card after emptying our bank account. I can forward them to your fraud department, if you like. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause on the line, and then the agent's professional tone returned, laced with what I could only describe as a hint of satisfaction. That will be excellent documentation, Mrs. Reed. I am canceling the card now. The charges will be reversed, and an investigation will be opened. Mr. Reed will no longer be able to use the account. I hung up and walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of wine, the good bottle of Sancerre I'd been saving. This, I decided, was a special occasion. Tomorrow, Liam and Chloe would arrive at the airport, full of triumphant glee, ready to embark on their new life. They would step up to the counter and discover their first-class tickets had evaporated into thin air. Their luxury hotel reservation would be gone. Their financial cushion would be non-existent. They were not starting a new life. They were simply stranded at the beginning of a very hard lesson. And I, in the quiet sanctuary of my ancestral home, took my first sip of freedom. It tasted crisp, clean, and wonderfully cold. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birdsong outside my window, a gentle, insistent chirping that promised a beautiful day. For the first time in over a year, I hadn't woken up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The vague, persistent dread had vanished, replaced by a quiet clarity. I made coffee, sat on my back porch overlooking the garden my mother had planted decades ago, and watched the sunrise. My phone, which I had placed on the wicker table beside me, began its frantic, buzzing dance around 7 a.m. The first text from Liam was confused. "My card was just declined for coffee. What's going on?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the rich, dark flavor. A few minutes later, another text, this one edged with irritation. "Alara, answer me. The check-in kiosk says our tickets are invalid. There's a problem with the payment. Did you do something?" I silenced my phone and went inside to get ready for work. Friday was always my busiest day at the Gilded Finch. A new collection of hand-thrown pottery from a local artist was arriving, and I wanted to create the perfect window display. Life, I mused, has a beautiful way of continuing, even when a man believes his departure should bring it to a screeching halt. By the time I arrived at the shop, the texts had escalated to full-blown rage. "What the hell did you do?" "The airline said the card was reported fraudulent. They canceled our tickets. The hotel reservation is gone too. Answer your phone, Alara." I put on my work apron, turned on the soft classical music I played for my customers, and began carefully unboxing the new pottery. Each piece was unique, earthy, and beautiful. I focused on the texture of the clay, the subtle variations in the glaze, the satisfying weight of it in my hands. Around noon, my business line rang. It was Deirdre, Liam's mother. Her voice was laced with a pained, reproachful tone she had perfected over years of defending her son's behavior. "Alara, dear. Liam just called me. He's in a dreadful state. He told me everything, how you've grown so cold and distant lately, how you drove him to this. And now he says you're being vindictive, deliberately ruining his travel plans." I cradled the phone between my ear and shoulder, carefully placing a stunning cobalt blue vase in the center of the window display. "Hello, Deirdre," I said calmly. "Did Liam happen to mention that he announced he was leaving me via text message? Or that he bragged about emptying our joint bank account to fund a trip with his 24-year-old girlfriend?" There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could picture her perfectly, sitting in her immaculate living room, her narrative of my coldness and her son's victimhood crumbling around her. "Well," she stammered, he said he was making a clean break. He felt you left him no choice." "He had many choices, Deirdre. He chose to be cruel, and he chose to steal. I have his text messages, if you'd like to hear them. The one where he mocks my little shop is particularly enlightening." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, the certainty in her voice had fractured. "A text message? That does seem inappropriate." He did sound a bit frantic. "I've always been fond of you, Deirdre," I said, my tone softening slightly but remaining firm. "But this is a legal matter now. My lawyer has advised me to have minimal contact with Liam's family while the proceedings are underway." "Proceedings?" Her voice was a shocked whisper. "You've already filed?" "Yes." "I have to go now. The shop is getting busy. Goodbye, Deirdre." I hung up before she could respond, severing a tie that had felt more like a chain for years. Later that afternoon, I got a call from a mutual friend, Sarah, her voice a mixture of sympathy and morbid curiosity. "Oh my God, Alara, I just got off the phone with Fiona, Liam's sister. She's been telling everyone that Liam and his new girl are stranded at some budget motel by the airport. Apparently, all his personal credit cards are maxed out. She's furious with you, says you've humiliated him." "Liam humiliated himself, Sarah," I said, arranging a display of silk scarves. "I just refused to finance it. My own lawyer, Eleanor, called with an update just before closing." "Good news," she said, her voice crisp and efficient. "Given the evidence you provided, his own written admission of draining the account and the documented credit card fraud, the judge has granted an emergency hearing for Monday morning. We're in an excellent position to have all remaining assets frozen until the divorce is settled." "Has he been served with the papers yet?" I asked, looking out at the sun setting over Main Street. A process server is on his way to the Pleasant Stay Motel near the airport as we speak. On another note, his girlfriend's social media is proving to be a treasure trove. She's been posting about their spontaneous adventure all day, including a photo of them in front of the airport with the caption, "Off to our new life." It establishes a clear timeline for his premeditation. I smiled. While Liam had been busy choreographing his grand, triumphant exit, he never once imagined that I was in the audience, taking meticulous notes, preparing for the final act. Just as I was about to lock up, my personal phone, which I had ignored all day, buzzed one last time. It was another text from Liam, this one oozing a desperate, misplaced confidence. "You think you're so smart, ruining our trip. But it doesn't matter. I was a partner in that shop in all but name. I made copies of all the financial records from the home computer. Half of that business is mine by law. You'll see." I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Eleanor with the simple message, "More evidence for Monday," and blocked his number. Let him bring his photocopied records. He would soon learn the difference between being a husband who offered occasional, condescending advice and a legal partner with a financial stake. Some lessons, I reflected, are best learned in a courtroom. As I walked home in the twilight, I felt a deep, abiding peace. The storm had broken, and my shelter, the one I had so carefully built, was holding strong. The emergency hearing on Monday felt like the formal setting for a conclusion that had already been reached. The courtroom was cavernous and cold, its marble floors and dark wood paneling designed to intimidate. But I felt no intimidation, only a sense of profound and weary resolution. I wore a simple navy blue dress and low heels, my grandmother's pearl earrings the only adornment. I was a Laura Reed, owner of the Gilded Finch, a woman of substance. Liam arrived looking like a caricature of his own crisis. He wore expensive, dark-washed jeans that were too tight, a slim-fit blazer that pulled awkwardly across his shoulders, and shoes that were clearly meant for a man 20 years younger. He looked exhausted and frayed, the swagger of his texts replaced by a sullen, defensive posture. Chloe was with him, hovering in the hallway outside the courtroom. She wore a bright pink sundress that seemed utterly out of place in the somber environment, her youth a stark, almost painful contrast to the harsh, fluorescent lighting. She looked less like a co-conspirator and more like a lost child. Inside, Eleanor Vance was a portrait of controlled power. She laid out our case with methodical precision, her voice calm and factual. She presented the judge with the timeline of events, supported by a binder thick with evidence. "Your Honor," she began, "on Tuesday morning, Mr. Reed informed my client, his wife of 15 years, via text message that he was leaving her for another woman." She placed a printout of the text on the judge's bench. In this same message, he admitted to emptying their joint savings account. She continued, her voice unwavering. He then proceeded to use a joint credit card to purchase first-class airfare and a luxury hotel stay for himself and his paramour, Miss Chloe Jensen. She submitted the credit card statement, highlighted, followed by the printout of Liam's gleeful text taking credit for the parting gift. Furthermore, Eleanor said, her gaze steady, "For the past year, Mr. Reed has exhibited a pattern of behavior indicating premeditation, including a significant increase in undisclosed personal spending, a documented history of charges at hotels and expensive restaurants, and the establishment of a relationship with a subordinate at his workplace, Miss Jensen." Liam's lawyer, a young, harried-looking man who had clearly been hired in a panic over the weekend, stood up. "Your Honor, my client admits he acted rashly. He was in a difficult emotional state. But Mrs. Reed's response has been disproportionate and vindictive, canceling his credit cards, filing for divorce within hours. It's a calculated act of revenge." Eleanor didn't miss a beat. "Calculated, Your Honor? Or prudent?" My client discovered her husband was dissipating marital assets to fund an extramarital affair. She took reasonable, legal steps to protect herself and her separate property. That is not vindictiveness. That is financial wisdom. The judge, a stern-faced woman with tired eyes who had clearly seen it all, peered at Liam over her spectacles. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice dangerously soft. "You admit you sent these text messages?" Liam shifted on his feet. Yes, but it was complicated." "It seems quite simple to me," the judge countered. "You took money that was not solely yours, and you used a shared line of credit to finance a vacation with your girlfriend. Is that a fair summary?" Liam's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, we also intend to argue that my client has a claim to a portion of the business, the Gilded Finch. It grew significantly during the marriage. He is entitled to a share of that growth." This was the moment. Eleanor opened another file. "Your Honor, the Gilded Finch was established by Mrs. Reed 3 years prior to the marriage, funded entirely by an inheritance from her grandmother. It is, and has always been, a sole proprietorship. We have incorporation documents, initial funding records, and 15 years of meticulous bookkeeping demonstrating a strict and unwavering separation between business and personal finances. Mr. Reed has never been an employee, a partner, or an investor. His name appears on no legal or financial documents related to the business." She paused for effect. His only contribution, by his own admission in numerous text messages, was to call it my client's little hobby. I watched Liam's face. I saw the flicker of disbelief, the dawning, horrifying realization that the rules he thought he knew, the assumptions he had always made, were wrong. He had never bothered to understand the details of my business, dismissing my careful record-keeping as a quaint quirk. He saw my quiet competence as passivity. He had never, not once, seen me as his equal. He was seeing it now in the cold, unyielding language of the law. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The court finds overwhelming evidence of financial misconduct and dissipation of marital assets on the part of Mr. Reed. All shared assets are to be frozen, pending a final settlement. Mr. Reed is ordered to return the $8,000 he removed from the joint account within 48 hours. But that money's gone. Liam burst out, his voice cracking. "We spent it. On deposits and things." "Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, Mr. Reed," the judge said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "And let me be very clear. The court looks exceptionally unfavorably on attempts to claim ownership of carefully maintained separate property. I suggest you and your counsel adjust your expectations accordingly." The gavel fell with a sharp, final crack. As we walked out of the courtroom, I could hear Chloe's anxious whisper to Liam in the echoing hallway. "What does this mean? What about Sanibel? What are we going to do?" His response was a low, angry mutter, lost in the sound of my own footsteps clicking confidently across the marble floor. I didn't look back. I was walking toward my shop, toward my life, toward the quiet, sturdy future I had so carefully preserved. The weeks that followed the hearing were a study in contrasts. Liam's life seemed to unravel in a series of desperate, clumsy maneuvers, while mine bloomed with an unexpected vitality. He tried to fight the judge's order, filing a motion claiming the boutique was morally half his because his emotional support had allowed it to flourish. Eleanor dismantled this argument in a single, scathing legal brief, attaching a dozen of his most condescending texts about my little shop as evidence. The motion was dismissed. News of his predicament trickled back to me through the town's gentle but efficient grapevine. Chloe, it turned out, had not signed up for a life of legal battles and financial ruin in a cramped studio apartment. The romantic fantasy of being rescued by an older, successful man dissolved when faced with the reality of a broke, bitter man sleeping on her futon. I heard from Sarah that Chloe had updated her relationship status to single and posted a cryptic quote about learning from your mistakes and moving on. The grand affair had lasted less than a month. Meanwhile, the Gilded Finch thrived. The story of my quiet victory had become something of a local legend. Women I barely knew came into the shop, their purchases feeling less like transactions and more like gestures of solidarity. My ex tried to pull the same thing, one woman confided, as she bought an expensive leather handbag. He thought I was too dumb to have my own lawyer. Men like that always underestimate us. The boutique sales doubled, then tripled. The profits, once a source of Liam's dismissive jokes, were now funding my future. Liam's family, who had initially circled their wagons around him, began to retreat. His sister, Fiona, who had been so vocal in her condemnation of me, appeared at my shop one afternoon. She browsed for a long time, her movements hesitant, before finally approaching the counter with a small silver locket. I wanted to apologize, Alara, she said, refusing to meet my eyes. He told us a story, and we believed him. We wanted to believe him. But then, seeing how he's acted, the things he said, that's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother, Deirdre, called again, her voice stripped of its former righteousness. She was crying. The things he said about your age, about replacing you. I don't know where we went wrong. I raised him to be a better man than that. I thought I did. I listened, offered polite but brief responses, and maintained my distance. Their regret was for their own blindness, not for my pain. Their family drama was no longer my concern. My life was moving in a different direction. The final divorce hearing was a quiet, perfunctory affair. Liam was there alone, looking diminished and tired. He had aged 10 years in 3 months. His lawyer, looking equally weary, made a few half-hearted arguments before conceding to the settlement Eleanor had drafted. I kept the house, the business, my savings, and my retirement accounts. Liam was awarded his personal effects, his heavily leveraged car, and his own substantial debt. As we left the courthouse for the last time, he cornered me by the elevators. His face was a mask of impotent fury. "You've destroyed me," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "I have nothing. I'll have to move back in with my parents." I looked at him, at this man I had once loved, and I felt not anger, not triumph, but a deep and profound pity. "No, Liam," I said, my voice soft but unwavering. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." His mother, Deirdre, was waiting for him by the curb, the engine of her sensible sedan running. She was here to drive her 46-year-old son home to his childhood bedroom. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. "You planned this," he accused, his voice rising. "You were planning this all along." "No," I said simply. "I was just paying attention. And unlike you, I always understood the value of good records." Deirdre stepped between us, her face etched with a weary shame. "That's enough, Mark," she said, using his full name like a mother scolding a child. "You've embarrassed yourself enough for one lifetime." As they drove away, I could see her through the rear window, already starting in on him, her hands gesturing emphatically. I watched them disappear into traffic, and I felt the last, lingering thread of my old life snap. A weight I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. My phone buzzed. For a heart-stopping second, I thought it might be him again, but I had blocked his number. It was a notification from my online store. A new order. And another. And another. Life was moving forward. The river of my life, which he had tried to violently divert, was now flowing freely, cutting a new, deeper, and more beautiful channel all its own. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood on a ladder in a dusty, sunlit space 2 towns over, a tape measure in my hand. The scent of sawdust and fresh paint filled the air. This was to be the second location of the Gilded Finch. The little shop was becoming a brand. I had hired a store manager, 2 new sales associates, and a web designer to overhaul our e-commerce site, which was now attracting customers from across the country. The success felt like a quiet validation, a testament to the years of hard work Liam had never truly seen. News of his life, in contrast, came in sporadic, sad updates. He was, as he predicted, living with his parents. His performance at Northwood Financial had plummeted, and the promotion he'd been banking on had gone to a younger, more focused colleague. The internal HR investigation into his relationship with Chloe had resulted in a formal reprimand on his record, effectively stalling his career indefinitely. His sister, Fiona, became a tentative but regular customer. During one of her visits, she confessed, he tried to use dating apps. He's finding that women his own age aren't interested in a man who lives with his mother and complains about his ex-wife. And the younger women, well, I think the story of him and Chloe got around the office. He's become something of a cautionary tale. My lawyer, Eleanor, would occasionally forward me updates on his futile legal efforts. He filed a petition to have the settlement revisited, claiming he had signed under duress. The judge dismissed it without a hearing. He actually argued that his text about emptying the account was a figure of speech. Eleanor told me over the phone, a note of amusement in her voice. The judge was not impressed. My own story, however, was being rewritten. A regional business journal asked to feature me in a series on successful female entrepreneurs. They wanted to talk about my branding, my curation of local artists, my expansion strategy. My divorce was a footnote, a catalyst mentioned in passing, not the headline. I found myself speaking to young women, artists and creators who came into the shop, advising them on setting up their own business accounts, on the importance of an LLC, on the quiet power of financial independence. The best protection is preparation, I told one young potter whose work I adored. And always trust your instincts. They're the quietest voice in the room, but they're almost always telling you the truth. Deirdre called me once, her voice small and sad. He's looking into online get-rich-quick schemes now. Day trading, cryptocurrency. He's trying to find a shortcut back to the life he threw away. His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet, to co-sign a loan for a small apartment, if he would just get some counseling, take some responsibility. But he just blames everyone. You, Chloe, his boss, the judge. I listened, but the story felt like it was about a stranger. The man she was describing was a ghost from a life I no longer lived. My world was filled with fabric swatches and purchase orders, with plans for a third location, with the quiet joy of watching something I had built with my own two hands continue to grow. In my office, above my desk, I framed a small, simple piece of paper. It was a screenshot of Liam's last, condescending text to me. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Beside it, I hung my first Businesswoman of the Year award from the Port Blossom Chamber of Commerce. They looked good together. One was the question, the other the answer. Success, I had learned, wasn't about revenge. It was about rendering the insult, the betrayal, completely and utterly irrelevant. It was about building a life so full and beautiful that the past simply had no room to reside there anymore. The best revenge wasn't loud. It was a quiet, unassailable peace.